Nick Bryant is back, longtime Epstein journalist. And just my luck, Nick, that Allison Morrow at CNN, who has the same name except for she has two L's. I guess she's trying to make up for something that she lacks. I don't need two L's. I just have one L and I'm fine with it. I always say, what are you hiding if you have two L's? Anyway, I'm sure she's a very nice person, though. I will be honest, some people don't like her work and they write me regularly telling me to go. Actually, I probably can't say it. I can't say it on this, what they tell me to do. But anyway, I'm not Allison Morrow with two L's. She wrote this for CNN, key takeaways from the latest trove of Epstein documents. And she actually says what I think you're going to say, which is there are mysteries still, and that they're familiar faces, but no bombshells. And I think you're also going to say that one of the key takeaways is that there are no consequences either, that it's just kind of came and went. It was salacious news, but life is just going to go back to normal. So I'm curious, you've been paying attention to the mainstream media, people like Allison Morrow. What did you think of the coverage of it? Let's start there first before we get into picking apart what was actually in the files.
Well, speaking of coverage, I was emailed by a CNN producer who wanted me to be on one of the network shows, and I said, "Yeah, sure." And then we exchanged some texts. We had a phone call. We exchanged some texts, and I said, "I am the guy that put Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book on the internet." And he said, "Yes, I know. That's how we're going to sell you." And I responded, "I've never been sold before. I hope you can get a good price for me." And then it was about 2 hours from airtime. And then I was inexplicably canceled. And this has happened to me before with, there was a network affiliate for Fox. And it was when the Sandusky scandal was breaking. And a junior producer had read the Franklin scandal, and she thought that I was like the perfect guy to talk about Sandusky and the Penn State cover up. And she had contacted me through my publisher, Trine. And I ultimately ended up talking to her boss, who I guess was a senior producer. And we talked for maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And that was about it. And then I was canceled by them, and they had told the publisher at Trine that the senior producer had talked to me and I was incoherent. Now, a lot of people have accused me of a lot of things, but I've never been accused of being incoherent before. So it's kind of surprising that I got this call from CNN. And what preceded them from canceling me was I said, "I'd really like to talk about Epstein Justice." And I said, if you look at the advisory board on Epstein Justice, there's a number of anti-trafficking heavyweights on the advisory board. And then shortly thereafter, I got the text that I was canceled from CNN. Imagine that.
Well, yeah, and I mean it could be any number of things. Obviously, it could totally have to do with they just don't want to deep dive into this stuff for whatever reason, and you're the deep dive guy. Sometimes I think that the way it works now with just these quick 90-second hits, which is what anybody is allowed to do anymore, if they're afraid that the guest is just going to go too deep, they're like, well, we just need somebody who's just going to keep the show going. And it's not really necessarily about exploring the topics at all and really understanding the nuances or the complexity, or in this particular case, just how nefarious the situation really is. It's just like, is this going to get more people to watch? And honestly, I've been in control rooms like at Fox News Channel when I was a producer there 20 years ago, where we were doing some kind of issue-oriented topic and a fire breaks out somewhere. And I hear my boss go, "Get on that fire and just stay on it," because they think that's what people are going to watch. And I'm curious, what do you think? Do you think that there just isn't enough interest, or do you think the media drives the interest, in which case they're more responsible? Like, because they might say, well, people don't want to watch this, they're over it. Do you hold the media responsible? Do you hold the general public responsible for lack of interest in this case? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that there's a lack of interest in the general with the public, because when there was this trove of Epstein documents, people were really tuned into it. I think where the problem is, and I have never seen the mainstream media, I've never seen an article or a segment in the mainstream media call for justice in the Epstein case. Not one. The media seems to specialize, at least in the Epstein case, manufacturing salacious dirt. And actually it's been very good at manufacturing salacious dirt. But when it comes to screaming for justice, no one in the mainstream media has screamed for justice. And Epstein has been sanitized. These girls, Maxwell and Epstein, were vicious to these girls. And you don't really get those accounts from the mainstream media. It's it's like they were trafficked and now they're all right. It's everything's better. And the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund gave them some money, and and now they've gone on to live their lives. And that is not the case. I mean, Epstein and Maxwell really damaged a lot of these girls for life, and they're going to have to live with the scars. And the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund is extremely problematic because it's very opaque. We do not know what the criteria is for getting a compensation. Some of the victims have been given very large compensations, and some of them have been given very small compensations. And those machinations are completely opaque. And but what's really troubling about the Epstein Victims Compensation Fund is if you accept any money from that fund, then you can no longer sue any other perps. So if you sign your name and get money, you cannot sue anybody else who molested you. And that's a real problem with that fund. So there were 225 women that applied for the fund, and there were 150 settlements given. 8 women decided not to take the settlement. And what's really interesting is I know 2 therapists who have clients who say that they were abused by Epstein, and actually these therapists actually believed them when they were under 10 years old. So they applied for compensation from the Epstein Fund, and they were not awarded compensation. And one of them was very definitive about Epstein's home and about the neighborhood. So both these therapists think that their clients were denied compensation because they didn't fit the cover story. The media cover story is that the youngest of the Epstein victims was 14 years old. I believe that there has been a settlement given to someone who was 13 years old at the time. But these therapists firmly believe that because their clients were under the age of 10, they were denied any kind of compensation from the victim's fund.
Nick, I want to take you over to locals real fast to put in a quick question that leads us into what was new, if there was anything new. If you want to join my editorial board and for $5 a month, get to put in questions ahead of time for people like Nick Bryant, some of the most censored people on the internet. It's also a great way to support my work, and you get a lot of value for your $5. Like I said, you get to put in questions. You're the interviewer, and you get a free media show with it, with your $5. It's an analysis show Bill Doris and I do. He used to be in TV News too. You get it in its entirety. We only put clips out everywhere else. And you get editorial board meetings when I'm able to do them between kids and all kinds of other stuff that goes on in our household. Cows, goats, you name it. Though the cows and goats don't live in the house. When I scroll down here, Nick, I see Critical Thought asks, the only thing that is new to me so far are the allegations against Stephen Hawking, which I have to say, I saw Owen Benjamin tweet something about it just being totally socially engineered, this whole thing just being a total fake, because Stephen Hawking was a quadriplegic, and this is just almost comedic at this point. That was his read. You know, there is such a gamut of opinions and commentary about not just this, but Epstein himself. I just had Dave Collum, a professor over at Cornell. I mean, very like mainstream Ivy League university, right? And he thinks Epstein's still alive. So this is not a topic where people are, all in alignment about it. It brings out all kinds of theories. Let's talk about what you think came out that was new at all. Like, was Stephen Hawking a surprise to you? Do you even believe that? And then could you just go into any surprises that you saw, or anything that you hadn't heard of before that wasn't out there?
Actually, Stephen Hawking's name had come up before, so that wasn't a new revelation. There wasn't really anything new. There was a deposition by one of the victims, Johanna Shelgren, and she said that she was talking to David Copperfield, and David Copperfield knew how Jeffrey Epstein had this machine that just was in constant use. It was ubiquitous, and it was controlling for victims. And there was also a exchange that she said that with Epstein, that they were talking about Bill Clinton, and Epstein said about Bill Clinton that he likes them young. And we know that Jeffrey Epstein was bringing in women to the White House when Bill Clinton was president. So there isn't at least I didn't find anything revelatory about it. But it's interesting how the mainstream media lit up with this. I mean, they were salivating. I mean, they even asked me to be on CNN. They changed their mind, but they even asked me. But there wasn't nothing new about what we already know about Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay, interesting. I have a bunch of questions for you from locals that I'm going to just go to because there's like 16 of them. Just a shout out, if you like wine, if you're a wine drinker and you want to support my work. I just had a guy on YouTube complain about ad reads after he watched a free video. So for all of you who are watching this video for free somewhere, this is why I do ad reads, because you're watching this for free. And believe you me, the ad revenue on YouTube at this point does not even pay for babysitting. So they don't like me. They probably don't like Nick. And I don't know what this video is going to do anyway on YouTube. Thank you so much to the editorial board, people who subscribe over on Rockfin, tip over on Rumble. It really does keep the podcast going. And if you're already, like I said, a buyer of some of the products in my affiliate links, check out the link description and the pinned comment, and you can go shop and support the work. But we'll just start with the wine. At AllisonWinePromo.com, you get to support my work and get some amazing wines from extremist regions of Argentina. You get 50% off the wine and 50% off shipping. It's a very pro-freedom, free speech company. And also the wine comes from very boutique vineyards, small family farms, natural fermentation, and no filtration. The grapes are at like 6,000 to 9,000 feet. They work very hard for your taste buds, just like Nick and I are working for you right now. So consider going to AllisonWinePromo.com. Get yourself some wine to get through the rest of this crazy year. Who knows what's coming up next after this? You're going to need a drink at the end of this, at least after this podcast, if not after many more podcasts I do in 2024. So go to AllisonWinePromo.com and support the show. Okay, so Nick, let's go back to locals and pick one of our questions over there.
Go for it.
Just go all the way to the beginning. Yes.
The wine, by the way, sounds like a very good deal.
I think it is. Good. I think it is, and it's just very good wine anyway, too. So, okay, DMC. The release was nothing but some testimony, which was already known, which has not been released, as the client list. Nick's Black Book is the most exposed in years. From my review of the latest release, it was allowed to cover for all the bigger fish and nothing about minor children. Do you agree this is all a cover-up hyped as exposing for those unaware?
Absolutely. I've done a number of podcasts recently because I've started an organization called Epstein Justice. So I'm getting out there as much as I can. And there's this mythological client list that people are talking about. There's no client list. No client list has been produced. I mean, the FBI probably has one, and the Department of Justice probably has one, but there's no client list. The closest we've come to a client list is me putting up the Black Book in 2015. And we have, and as I said earlier, the latest document dump has no revelations, no new revelations, or very minor revelations. And people keep, and this is a little frustrating to me because I look at the comments of the podcasts I've been on, and they're talking about this client list, and there isn't a client list.
And since you brought up justice, this is your website, epsteinjustice.com. Would you like to tell us a little bit about it?
EpsteinJustice.com is a 501c3, so you can make donations to us, and they're 100% tax deductible. And what we're doing is it's a grassroots movement, and we're going to ultimately get enough people to demand justice. And Epstein Justice, we started it in July, and it's growing. It's growing, definitely. This month, we've already got 14,000 views on one of the pages, and it also has an advisory board. And the advisory board is there is one Epstein victim on the advisory board, but also a number of heavyweights when it comes to anti-trafficking. And the thing about Epstein Justice is we are not going to get justice. And I wrote a book called The Franklin Scandal, and that was about an interstate child trafficking network that was covered up by the FBI and the Department of Justice, just like Epstein has been covered up by the FBI and Department of Justice. And at this point, we need to do something about that. We cannot let the Department of Justice cover up child trafficking. We would never trust an individual or entity that is partaking or covering up child trafficking, because if you cover up a crime, you're aiding and abetting that crime. We would never trust anyone aiding and abetting child trafficking. So how can we trust our government? And I firmly believe that with this issue, if you drill deep enough into this issue, you will come across the cesspool that is currently governing us. The congressional approval rating is 17%. It's very obvious that the vast majority of Americans do not think that our Congress is acting on our behalf. And you could tell, laws are passed that trample on our constitutional rights. Laws are passed that create this intense wealth polarization. And I do believe that a number of our politicians are compromised. There was Congressman Tim Burchett from Tennessee who came out within the last month and said a number of his colleagues are being blackmailed because of what they're doing in motels. So it was great that finally someone in Congress has basically said what I've been saying for a number of years, is that our politicians are compromised. So if we dig into, if Americans demand justice and we dig into the Epstein issue, I think we can clean out a lot of our government, because it'll show the machinations that have been used to cover up Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein Justice has two primary goals, and it's very simple. We want the perpetrators prosecuted, and we want to know why the government has covered up child trafficking. And we can do that through a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And this isn't going to be easy, but I believe that it can be done. The civil rights movement wasn't easy, but ultimately it changed how we view and it changed America. The women's rights movement wasn't easy, but ultimately it changed our society. Gay rights was not easy, but ultimately it changed our society. So this is, I think, the last frontier, the abuse of children. There's every institution, or many institutions have covered up child abuse, like the churches and the Boy Scouts and academic institutions. So this issue is, we're at the frontier, and when we dig into this issue, we will come across, as I said, the cesspool that governs us.
Okay. And if people go to epsteinjustice.com, there's a place where you can click and it'll take you to a link to the petition. If you want to sign the petition, it'll take you there. And you can also follow Nick at nickbryantnyc.com and read his blogs. And you're also on Twitter at Nick_Bryant. So just make sure you are following him if you're interested in these topics.